The galaxy burned. Stars flickered like dying embers as warships clashed in the black void. Plasma bolts cut through the darkness, carving fiery trails in the wreckage of fallen fleets. Amidst the chaos, a lone escape pod hurtled toward the barren wastelands of Xal'vath 9, its hull scorched, its systems failing. Inside, Queen Seraphina of Valtheris clenched her jaw. The weight of her lost throne pressed against her chest, suffocating. Her once glorious empire had fallen into rebellion's grasp, torn from her by deceit and betrayal. The pod's impact was violent, throwing her against the cold metal walls. Pain flared through her ribs, but she forced herself upright. A queen did not break, not even in exile. The door hissed open, revealing an alien landscape bathed in the eerie glow of Xal'vath's twin moons. Jagged rock formations stretched for miles, and the sky churned with crimson clouds. She had no army, no allies, only her will to reclaim what was hers. Somewhere across the universe, on a planet far less dramatic, Dr. Adrian Cole sighed as he stared at the flickering holoscreen before him. The small medical outpost he operated on the outskirts of Orion Prime was quiet, save for the hum of outdated machinery and the occasional chirp from his cybernetic assistant, Bix. "You are experiencing boredom," Bix observed, tilting its sleek metallic head. "No," Adrian muttered, rubbing his temples. "I'm experiencing peace, and I'd like to keep it that way." Unfortunately, fate had other plans. A distress signal blared across the console. A royal code. Adrian groaned. "Oh, come on. Can't someone else deal with this?" He had left behind the high-stakes life of galactic politics long ago, but duty and curiosity pulled at him. He keyed in the coordinates, and his stomach tightened as he saw where the signal had originated. Xal'vath 9. A place no sane person would go willingly. "Bix," Adrian said, standing. "Prep the ship." The AI chirped. "Shall I pack extra medical supplies for whoever is about to ruin your peaceful existence?" Adrian sighed. "Yeah, and a lot of patience." The ship's engines roared to life, shaking the small outpost as Adrian double-checked the coordinates. Xal'vath 9. A cursed rock on the edge of known space. He had no reason to go there, no obligation to get involved in royal affairs, yet something in his gut told him this wasn't just another routine distress call. The universe had a way of dragging him into things whether he liked it or not. Bix hovered beside him as he piloted the ship into the vast blackness of space. The AI's single glowing eye flickered. "Statistically, the probability of survival on Xal'vath 9 is—" "Don't tell me," Adrian cut in. "I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than hopelessly aware." The journey took hours. As the barren wasteland of Xal'vath 9 loomed ahead, Adrian braced himself. The planet was as inhospitable as he'd heard. Endless deserts of jagged obsidian rock, acid storms rolling across the horizon, and ruins of civilizations long forgotten. His scanners picked up the crash site within minutes, a smoldering wreck of what had once been an escape pod. Adrian landed a safe distance away, the ship's ramp lowering as he stepped onto the cracked earth. The air was thin but breathable. Heat pressed against his skin as he scanned the area. Movement. A shadow shifting behind a cluster of rock formations. He gripped the small pulse pistol at his belt. "If you're gonna shoot me, do it now and save me the trouble." A figure stepped forward. Tall, regal, dangerous. Even covered in dust and bruises, Queen Seraphina radiated authority. Her silver-white hair was disheveled, her golden eyes sharp and unyielding. She wore a torn cloak over what had once been intricate royal armor, now cracked and scorched from battle. She studied him for a long moment, as if assessing whether he was worth her time. "You're late," she finally said, voice cool despite the situation. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Didn't realize I was expected." She crossed her arms, showing no sign of gratitude. "You received my signal, did you not? I assumed you were competent enough to follow it sooner." Adrian exhaled sharply. "Right. Because nearly dying on a hostile planet gives you the right to be condescending." She lifted her chin slightly. "A queen does not beg for aid." Adrian bit back a remark about how queens also weren't supposed to get themselves stranded in the middle of nowhere. Instead, he motioned to his ship. "Well, Your Majesty, Unless you're planning to single-handedly take on an entire planet, you might want to swallow your pride and get on board. Seraphina hesitated. Trust did not come easily, and humans were rarely worth trusting. But her options were limited, and time was against her. She stepped forward. I assume you have medical supplies? Adrian gestured toward the ship's interior. Enough to fix whatever damage you've done to yourself. She walked past him without another word. As the ramp closed behind them, Adrian knew he had just made a terrible decision. The ship's interior was dimly lit, the hum of the engines a familiar comfort as Adrian gathered his medical kit. Seraphina sat on the edge of the cot, her posture rigid even as exhaustion threatened to overtake her. You can relax, he said, scanning her with his medical device. You're not dying. Just banged up. I do not relax, she replied, golden eyes locked onto his. Not when my enemies are still breathing. Adrian glanced at her, taking in the fire behind her gaze. He had seen people driven by vengeance before. It rarely ended well. You planning on telling me what happened? Or should I just assume the usual royal betrayal? Seraphina stiffened. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a quieter voice, she spoke. My council turned against me. They aligned with the Xal'vath syndicate. I was ambushed. My own generals hesitated when it mattered most. Adrian frowned. The Xal'vath were more than just a syndicate. They were conquerors. Parasites that latched onto civilizations, hollowing them out from the inside. If they had taken Valtheris, things were far worse than he thought. You lost everything, he said, not unkindly. Seraphina's jaw tightened. Not everything. Adrian studied her for a moment before placing the medical scanner aside. Well, you're patched up for now. But if you want to take back your throne, you'll need more than a reluctant doctor and an old ship. Seraphina tilted her head. You assume I need you. Adrian smirked. You did send that distress call, didn't you? She didn't answer. Outside, the universe moved on. Stars burned. War loomed. And an exiled queen and a reluctant healer found themselves bound by fate. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Adrian leaned back against the console, arms crossed as he watched Seraphina carefully. She sat stiffly on the cot, the weight of exile pressing against her shoulders, though she refused to show it. All right, Your Majesty, he said, voice laced with exhaustion. What exactly is the plan? Because if you're expecting me to just drop you off at some secret royal hideout, I've got bad news. You don't have one anymore. Seraphina's golden eyes flickered with irritation. I did not come here for a lecture, human. Doctor, he corrected. And I'm just pointing out the obvious. Valtheris is gone. The Xal'vath don't leave survivors. If they wanted you dead, you wouldn't be sitting here bleeding all over my ship. Which means they want you alive. For now. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Adrian sighed. I'm guessing you have some kind of loyalists out there? A hidden fleet? A forgotten battalion of warriors waiting for your return? Seraphina's silence spoke louder than words. Right, Adrian muttered. So, no army. No resources. No allies. Just an ex-queen and a doctor who should have ignored a distress signal. Seraphina's gaze was sharp enough to cut steel. If you regret coming, leave me here. Adrian let out a humorless laugh. And let you wander around this death trap of a planet until something eats you? Yeah, not exactly my style. Besides, I just restocked my medical supplies. I'd rather not waste them by letting you bleed out in the sand. She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across her expression. Finally, she spoke. There is one place. Adrian arched a brow. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Seraphina ignored his sarcasm. Deep in the Vorner Nebula, past the outskirts of the old trade routes, there is a world called Crixos 4. It is uncharted by most. But before the fall, I stationed a Valtherian outpost there. An outpost? Adrian echoed. What kind of outpost? She hesitated, then said, one that was never meant to be found. Adrian frowned. So, we're flying blind into a nebula full of potential death traps, in search of an outpost that may or may not still exist, while being hunted by a syndicate that conquers entire star systems. Seraphina met his gaze. Do you have a better option? Adrian exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. No. Which is exactly why I hate this plan. Bix, who had remained silent until now, chimed in. Shall I prepare the ship for departure to Crixos for? Or would you prefer to continue debating until your enemies locate us? Adrian shot the AI a glare. I liked you better when you weren't so damn smug. Bix beeped in what Adrian swore was amusement before turning toward the ship's navigation system. Seraphina stood, her movements careful but steady. Even weakened, she carried herself with the same authority, the same presence of someone who had once ruled entire star systems. Set course for Crixos 4, she commanded. Adrian sighed and turned toward the controls, setting course for almost certain disaster. Fantastic. As the ship's engines roared to life, the universe outside stretched and twisted. Stars became streaks of light as they jumped into hyperspace. Adrian had a bad feeling about all of this, and he was usually right. The ship tore through hyperspace, streaks of blue and white flashing past the viewport. Inside, the tension was almost suffocating. Seraphina sat in the co-pilot's chair, silent, gaze fixed on the swirling abyss outside. Adrian, fingers drumming against the control panel, kept stealing glances at her. She was a mystery, a dethroned queen with no army, no resources, yet she carried herself like she still had a kingdom waiting for her return. Adrian sighed. So, what's on Crixos for? A secret stash of weapons? A hidden fleet? Some long-lost allies who actually give a damn? Seraphina didn't look at him. You ask too many questions. That's funny, considering I'm the one risking my neck flying you straight into trouble. She finally turned to him, her golden eyes sharp. If you are afraid, you are welcome to leave. Adrian exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Lady, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're in hyperspace. Kind of hard to leave when we're in the middle of a jump. She smirked slightly. A shame. He narrowed his eyes. Was that a joke? Are you capable of humor? Seraphina didn't answer, but there was the faintest glint of amusement in her eyes. Bix interrupted before Adrian could push further. We are approaching the Vorner Nebula. Exiting hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. The ship jolted as they dropped back into normal space, and the view before them was breathtaking. The Vorner Nebula stretched across the void, a swirling mass of deep blues, violent reds, and shimmering golds. Electrical storms crackled between gaseous clouds, illuminating the darkness with bursts of light. But beyond its beauty, the nebula was a graveyard. Derelict ships drifted in the void, ancient wrecks, their hulls covered in scars from battles long forgotten. Adrian tightened his grip on the controls. Tell me we're not flying through that. Seraphina remained calm. The outpost is on the far side of the nebula. It is well hidden. That is why I chose it. Bix beeped. That is also why it is impossible to scan for potential threats. Adrian groaned. Fantastic. Blind flying through an electrified death cloud. What could possibly go wrong? Seraphina ignored him. Take us in. Adrian muttered a string of curses under his breath but complied. The ship's engines flared as they entered the nebula, the hull rattling as turbulent waves of energy crashed against them. Lightning arced across the sky, illuminating twisted remains of ships long lost to the storm. Seraphina remained unervingly still. Adrian, on the other hand, was gripping the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. Remind me again why you thought hiding something here was a good idea? She finally turned to him. Because no sane person would come looking for it. Adrian opened his mouth, then shut it. He had to admit, she had a point. Minutes passed. The deeper they went, the worse the interference became. Sensors flickered. The ship's stabilizers whined in protest. But then, through the thick clouds of swirling gas, a shadow emerged. A structure. Adrian narrowed his eyes. It wasn't just an outpost, it was a fortress. Built into the jagged remains of a shattered moon, the Valtherian outpost loomed ahead, its blackened towers still intact despite the passage of time. Faint energy signatures flickered across its hull, weak but still active. Adrian let out a breath. Well, I'll be damned. Seraphina's lips curved slightly. I told you. He shook his head. Yeah. Don't get smug yet. Let's make sure we're not walking into a trap first. As the ship descended toward the structure, Adrian's gut twisted. Something about this felt too easy. And easy was never a good thing. The ship touched down on the outpost's landing platform with a metallic thud, sending a faint echo through the hollow, abandoned structure. The atmosphere outside was thin but breathable. The scanners detected no immediate life signs, but Adrian knew better than to trust faulty readings in a place like this. He powered down the engines and glanced at Seraphina. She was already on her feet, adjusting the tattered remains of her cloak, her expression unreadable. "You sure this place is still safe?" Adrian asked, unstrapping his harness. Seraphina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she strode to the ramp, pausing only to glance back at him. "If it were truly safe, I wouldn't have needed to hide it," Adrian groaned. "That's comforting." Bix hovered beside him as he followed Seraphina down the ramp, his boots making a dull clank against the cold metal floor. The outpost was massive, built into the remains of a fractured moon, its jagged rock formations fused with dark, alien steel. The towering structures loomed over them, half swallowed by time and neglect. Faint emergency lights flickered along the corridors leading into the main base. The silence was oppressive, thick with the ghosts of whatever had happened here long ago. Seraphina pressed her palm against a control panel on the wall. The metal beneath her fingers glowed faintly before letting out a tired hiss. The massive doors ahead of them groaned open, revealing a dark corridor stretching into the unknown. Adrian adjusted the strap of his medkit. "Yeah, see this? This is the part where people in old horror vids get murdered by something lurking in the dark." Seraphina didn't slow her pace. "If something wanted us dead, it would have revealed itself by now. That doesn't make me feel better." Bix beeped. "Probability of encountering hostile entities is at..." Adrian cut the AI off with a raised hand. "Nope, don't want to hear it." They stepped inside. The air was stale, filled with the scent of rust and decay. The corridors were lined with old Valtherian technology, dormant consoles coated in a thin layer of dust. Adrian's gaze flickered over the alien architecture. Valtherian design was sleek and elegant, but there was a coldness to it. Everything sharp angles and gleaming obsidian steel. Even abandoned, the place felt alive, as if the walls themselves were watching. Seraphina walked with purpose, her fingers grazing the walls as if reconnecting with something long lost. "How long has this place been abandoned?" Adrian asked, his voice hushed without meaning to be. "Years," Seraphina replied. "It was meant to be a failsafe, a refuge, should Valtheris fall." Adrian frowned. "And yet, here we are with no welcoming committee." Seraphina stopped. Ahead of them, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, filled with towering data cores and dimly lit consoles. The command center. She moved to the main console, placing her hand on its surface. The interface flickered, struggling to reboot. Ancient Valtherian symbols scrolled across the screens, too fast for Adrian to make sense of. Then something beeped. A low, distorted sound, like an old system trying to come back to life. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. "Someone has been here." Adrian tensed. "Define someone." The lights above them flickered, and for the first time since they entered, Adrian heard something. A faint sound in the distance. Metal shifting, something moving. Bix beeped. Movement detected. 200 meters. Approaching. Adrian slowly reached for his pulse pistol. "You were saying about this place being safe?" Seraphina's grip tightened on the console. "Prepare yourself." A shadow flickered at the far end of the room. A figure, stepping into the dim light. It wasn't human. Tall and armored. Its body a fusion of organic muscle and sleek, biomechanical plating. Its glowing, insectoid eyes locked onto them with cold calculation. A Xal'vath enforcer. Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Oh, fantastic. The universe's worst parasites decided to crash our little homecoming party." The enforcer let out a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a mechanical pulse. Then, with terrifying speed, it lunged. Adrian barely had time to curse before everything exploded into chaos. Adrian barely managed to throw himself sideways as the Xal'vath enforcer lunged, its bladed arm slicing through the air where he had just been standing. The force of the attack sent sparks flying as the blade carved into the metal flooring. Seraphina moved faster. With the grace of a warrior born, she twisted, drawing a sleek, curved blade from beneath her cloak. The weapon hummed with energy as she parried the enforcer's next strike, the impact sending a shockwave through the chamber. Adrian scrambled to his feet, pulse pistol raised. He fired 3 rapid shots. The blue bolts of energy struck the enforcer's chitinous armor, but barely left a mark. Of course, he muttered. Why would it ever be that easy? The enforcer lashed out, claws slashing towards Seraphina's throat. She ducked, twisting her blade in a fluid arc, carving deep into the creature's side. Dark, viscous fluid oozed from the wound, but the enforcer barely flinched. It retaliated instantly, a jagged limb shooting forward like a spear. Seraphina leapt back, but she wasn't fast enough. The blade grazed her arm, leaving a deep cut along the exposed skin. Adrian's heart kicked up a notch. Bix, any chance you've got a brilliant idea right about now? Bix's glowing eye flickered. One moment. Calculating. Calculate faster. The enforcer turned toward Adrian, assessing him as the weaker target. It charged. Adrian barely had time to swear before he dove behind a console, the impact of the enforcer's strike sending metal shards flying. Seraphina took the opening. She launched herself forward, her blade crackling with raw energy. With a precise, brutal strike, she drove the weapon deep into the enforcer's exposed joint, twisting as the blade severed something vital. The enforcer let out a mechanical shriek, its body convulsing before it finally collapsed, its glowing eyes flickering and fading. For a moment, there was silence. Adrian let out a long breath. Well, that was horrible. Seraphina ignored her bleeding arm and crouched over the enforcer's corpse. Her golden eyes were cold as she inspected its body. This was not a coincidence. Adrian frowned. Yeah, I figured. The Xal'vath don't just randomly send assassins to abandoned outposts. Someone sent it. Seraphina wiped her blade clean. Which means they know I'm alive. Bix beeped. Also, unfortunate update. I have intercepted a transmission. More enforcers inbound. Estimated arrival, 5 minutes. Adrian exhaled sharply. Oh, come on. Can we catch a break for once? Seraphina rose to her full height. We need to move. Now. She strode toward the console she had activated earlier, typing in a sequence of commands. The screen flickered, revealing a map of the outpost. A blinking red dot marked something deep within the structure. The armory, she said. If it's still intact, we will find the weapons we need to survive. Adrian ran a hand down his face. I swear, if we get there and find nothing but rust and disappointment. Seraphina had already started moving. With no better options, Adrian followed, Bix hovering beside him. The corridors of the outpost were a maze of dark steel and shadowed corners, the hum of old technology the only sound besides their hurried footsteps. Adrian's mind raced. The Xal'vath wouldn't just send a few enforcers. If they had tracked Seraphina here, they'd send a fleet. And if a fleet arrived, tell me there's a way out of this that doesn't involve dying horribly, he muttered. Seraphina didn't slow her pace. There is. Adrian arched a brow. Oh, good. You want to share it with the class? Or is this one of those just trust me situations? She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. We reclaim Valtheris. Adrian stopped walking. I'm sorry, what? She turned to face him fully. The outpost was not just a failsafe. It was a vault, a hidden cache of Valtherian war assets. If we reach the armory, we will have more than enough firepower to fight back. Adrian blinked. You want to go to war? Against the Xal'vath? With just us? She took a step closer, golden eyes burning. I do not intend to fight alone. Adrian's stomach twisted. He had spent years trying to stay out of wars, out of politics, out of royal disasters. He had seen too many people die trying to be heroes. And yet, he looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, the determination that refused to break. He sighed. This is the dumbest thing I've ever agreed to. Seraphina smirked. Then let's not waste time. The enforcers were coming. But for the first time, Adrian wasn't just running. He was fighting back. Adrian and Seraphina sprinted through the dark corridors of the outpost, the sounds of distant movement echoing behind them. The Xal'vath enforcers were closing in fast. Bix hovered ahead, projecting a glowing pathway toward their destination. The armory is 70 meters ahead, Bix reported. However, I must warn you. A deafening screech rang through the metal walls. The sound of something massive shifting. Adrian groaned. Yeah, I don't even want to hear it. Let me guess, more bad news? Bix beeped. Something large has entered the outpost. Seraphina's grip tightened on her weapon. Then we must move faster. They rounded the last corner, coming face to face with a massive reinforced door. Valtherian runes glowed faintly on its surface, their energy long faded but still operational. Seraphina stepped forward and pressed her palm against the interface. The system hesitated before scanning her biometrics, as if unsure whether to grant access after so many years. A moment of tense silence. Then, with a deep mechanical groan, the doors slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in dim blue light. The armory. Inside, rows of Valtherian weapons lined the walls, sleek, deadly technology that had once been wielded by the mightiest warriors in the galaxy. Pulse rifles, plasma blades, ion grenades, all untouched by time. Adrian whistled. Okay, now this I can work with. Seraphina wasted no time. She moved to the far end of the chamber, where a suit of intricate Valtherian battle armor stood on a pedestal. It was regal yet terrifying, crafted from an alloy that shimmered in the low light. She ran a hand over the surface, as if reacquainting herself with an old friend. This was my father's, she murmured. A relic of a forgotten war. Adrian strapped a plasma pistol to his thigh. Well, let's unforget it. We're gonna need all the help we can get. The ground trembled beneath them. A low, inhuman growl echoed through the halls. Bix's eye flickered red. Incoming hostiles. One of significant size. Adrian grabbed a rifle and backed toward the door. Define significant. The answer came crashing through the far wall. A monstrous Xal'vath war beast, 8 feet tall, with plated armor and serrated claws, lunged into the armory. Its glowing eyes locked onto Seraphina, recognizing her as the true threat. Seraphina barely had time to raise her weapon before it attacked. The beast moved impossibly fast for its size, swiping a massive claw toward her. She twisted, narrowly avoiding being torn in half. The force of the strike sent weapons and debris flying across the room. Adrian fired 3 rounds at the creature's back. The shots barely left a dent. Oh, come on, he yelled. Why is everything in this galaxy so damn hard to kill? Bix beeped. Might I suggest shooting it in the head? Adrian rolled his eyes. Oh, great tip, Bix. Why didn't I think of that? Seraphina moved with deadly precision, darting beneath the beast's next attack and slicing her plasma blade along its exposed flank. The weapon cut deep, sending a shower of dark fluid onto the floor. The beast howled in pain but didn't slow. Adrian aimed for its head and fired a charged shot. The bolt of energy struck one of its glowing eyes, causing the beast to reel back in agony. Seraphina didn't waste the opening. She lunged, driving her blade straight through the creature's skull. A final, guttural shriek, then silence. The war beast collapsed, its lifeless body twitching before going still. Adrian let out a breath. Holy hell! Seraphina withdrew her blade, her expression unreadable. They will not stop coming. Adrian slung his rifle over his shoulder. Yeah, I figured that much. So what's the plan now? Seraphina turned toward a terminal near the armory's entrance. She activated a sequence, and a holographic map of the sector appeared. She pointed to a location on the farthest edge of the galaxy. This is the last known location of my remaining loyalists, she said. If they still live, they will fight. Adrian studied the map. And if they're gone? Seraphina met his gaze, her golden eyes unwavering. Then we fight alone. A beat of silence. Then Adrian sighed, shaking his head. Damn it. I really should have ignored that distress signal. But as he looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, the weight of her cause, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. Bix hovered beside him. Shall I prepare the ship? Adrian smirked. Yeah, Let's go start a rebellion. And as they left the outpost, weapons in hand, ready to defy the most feared force in the galaxy, Adrian realized something. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He had something worth fighting for.